Hello, I'm Dave, and I'm back with another look at F1 2016. This time we've got all three versions of the game here, PC, PS4 and Xbox One. So, this is the PC version running at 1080p max settings, and yes, it's running at 60 frames per second. Now this is exactly the kind of experience we expect on current generation consoles. Well, with regards to frame rate at least, but that's not what we're actually getting on PS4 and Xbox One. But I guess the question is this, just how much of a graphical upgrade are we getting on PC besides the boost in frame rates? Well, we're going to be taking a look at that shortly, but first, let's kick off with a look at the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions. So, on consoles we are actually looking at a similar rendering setup to last year's game, at least in terms of resolution. On PS4 we're looking at native 1080p with post-process anti-aliasing, whereas on Xbox One we see around 1440 by 1080, a reduction in horizontal resolution. Of course, post-process anti-aliasing is also in effect here, what looks like SMAA, judging by the PC version. Anyway, this of course means that the PS4 version does deliver a slightly sharper and in fact cleaner image. Now this is most noticeable during bright daytime conditions, but elsewhere the two look reasonably comparable, to be honest, with just a slight softness creeping on an Xbox One at times. Outside of that, the other big difference comes with the use of ambient occlusion. The effect is present on PS4 but is absent on Xbox One. Take a look here and you can see how this extra level of indirect shadowing produces depth to the scene on PS4, particularly around areas where structures meet, such as in the corners of buildings, whereas on Xbox One the same scene looks a touch flatter as a result. Beyond that, the core assets and effects work are mostly identical. We've got the same textures here, the same level of geometry, and streaming is pretty much the same. Sometimes PS4's faster by a frame or so, sometimes Xbox One, but it's not something that you really spot during gameplay. Post-process and alpha effects also appear mostly identical. The only exception is object and camera motion blur, where the Xbox One version appears to use slightly fewer samples. So that's the console versions, and it's a very respectable presentation on both platforms, but the PC, that's where the real potential for considerable upgrades lie. On the face of it, image quality is very similar, but there is a slight benefit here. On PC we're running at 1080p with SMAA and TAA enabled. Now the TAA provides an extra temporal component, and this basically adds slightly better coverage across the scene, particularly with regards to reducing subpixel shimmering. It doesn't completely eliminate these issues though, and as a result the presentation is a touch softer than on PS4. But on the flip side, we have the ability to turn it off if we want. Beyond that, core geometry and texture details do appear to be the same as on consoles, which is basically what we saw in last year's F1 game too. However, the PC does feature the same usual refinements we'd expect to see on the platform. Shadow quality, for instance, is much higher. Here we see the use of high resolution shadows. Note that the cascade is actually quite similar to PS4 and Xbox One, but the lower quality shadows in this segment are actually rendered at higher resolution on PC, and this means there are fewer stair-step artifacts on the screen. On top of that, LOD streaming is also improved on the PC too, both with regards to textures and shadows. Lower quality assets rarely crop up on screen, and of course draw distances are further fleshed out too in these areas, with less shadow pop-up. Reflection quality is also improved. Note that we get higher resolution reflections of both the car bodywork and wing mirrors, and it's worth pointing out that on PC we get additional environment reflections too. So far this all adds an extra layer of refinement to the PC game, and this is backed up with the higher use of anisotropic filtering. We're using 16x here on PC, but on consoles we're looking at around 4x. Well, actually it looks to be variable. Either way, the PC version definitely provides an extra layer of clarity to assets on screen, particularly at long distances. So the PC version does deliver an upgrade over the PS4 and Xbox One versions. In fact, it's more refinement than a striking difference, but when you combine this with the ability to run at resolutions above 1080p, and indeed simply run the game at 1080p 60, then actually it's a worthy upgrade overall. In that respect, if you absolutely want to play F1 2016 at 60 FPS, then the PC version is the way to go. But if you're a console user, then well, the decision is pretty clear cut. The PlayStation 4 delivers the better experience of the two. It's not perfect, and the frame rate drops and screen tearing are annoying, but the game is more playable and more enjoyable to look at, whereas the Xbox One version, well, it's kind of playable, but we feel the experience just isn't up to par, and we expected kind of more from the second version of this game on current generation systems. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Feel free to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed our coverage of F1 2016, and don't forget to subscribe to support Digital Foundry. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.